From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
All right, Steve, we're gonna go forward with the plan with the burner. I want it like we talked about. 7 burners deployed and we have a fire.
Copy, 7 burners deployed and we have a fire.
I can tell you that it was not on purpose. We did not intentionally burn down that cabin to get Mr. Dorner out.
As medical examiners positively identify the remains of fugitive former Los Angeles police officer Christopher Dorner, questions are being raised about his death. Did police intentionally set his hideout on fire using flammable tear gas? We'll speak with former Seattle Police Chief Norm Stamper and Radley Balco, author of Rise of the Warrior Cop, the Militarization of America's Police Forces. Then we look at voting rights.
Do our part to make sure our God-given rights are protected here at home. That includes one of the most fundamental rights of a democracy, the right to vote.
After more than 200,000 Florida residents alone gave up in frustration without voting due to long lines on Election Day, President Obama announces a new bipartisan commission to fix the nation's broken voting system. We'll speak with NAACP President Ben Jealous. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Senate Republicans have blocked the nomination of Senator Chuck Hagel to become the next U.S. Secretary of Defense in a move blasted by Democrats. Republicans say they want more information first from the White House about events surrounding the fatal attack on the U.S. diplomatic mission in Benghazi, Libya, last September. This is Republican Senator John Cornyn of Texas.
The majority leader knows full well that the reason why cloture was denied or the closing off debate was denied is because there are reasonable requests being made on this side for additional information. And I hope and trust that that information will be provided here in the next few days. And when we come back from the recess, we'll have another vote and another opportunity for senators to express themselves. But this is not any attempt to kill this nomination. This is not a filibuster.
Democrats are vowing to revive Hagel's nomination following a recess next week. Despite Republican denials, Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid said the bloc represents an historic filibuster.
The filibuster of Senator Hagel's confirmation is unprecedented. I repeat, not a single nominee for Secretary of Defense ever in the history of our country has been filibustered. Never, ever.
Chuck Hagel is a former Republican senator who has faced criticism for straying from the party line on Iran and the Iraq War and for making comments perceived as critical of Israel. President Obama touted Hagel's Republican credentials Thursday during an online video chat.
Chuck Hagel, who, by the way, was a member of the Republican caucus, a colleague of all of these folks, who the Republican leader, Mitch McConnell, and others consistently praised when he was still in the Senate, who has 2 purple stars, 2 Purple Hearts, was an extraordinary soldier, was the head of the USO, served on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and is praised by people like Brent Scowcroft, who was George H.W. Bush's National Security Advisor, and Colin Powell and others, is eminently qualified to be Secretary of Defense.
Bahraini authorities say they're probing the deaths of a teenager and a policeman during mass protests and clashes marking the 2nd anniversary of Bahrain's pro-democracy uprising. 16-year-old Hussein al-Jaziri was reportedly shot by authorities at close range on Thursday. In Russia, about 400 people were reportedly injured when a meteorite shot across the sky and dropped balls of fire down to Earth. Video shows the meteorite blazing a brilliant path of light across the sky. Mass panic ensued as car alarms went off and windows shattered. Authorities said most injuries were minor and resulted from flying glass. Authorities in California say the body found inside a burnt-out cabin in California is that of former police officer and shooting suspect Christopher Dorner. Dorner is accused of waging a campaign of terror against his former employer, the Los Angeles Police Department, and ultimately killing 4 people, including a sheriff's deputy caught in a shootout at the cabin. Dorner had accused the department of racism and corruption. Officials deny they intentionally set a fire that gutted the cabin where Dorner was hiding, but admit the blaze was ignited by their pyrotechnic-style tear gas canisters known as burners. Dorner's scorched remains had to be identified by dental records. We'll have more on the story later in the broadcast. American Airlines and U.S. Airways have announced plans to merge, creating the world's largest airline. In an editorial in the New York Times, it called for antitrust regulators to probe the merger, which would put more than 70% of passenger business under the control of 4 airlines. Senate Democrats have announced a plan to avert automatic spending cuts set to kick in under the looming sequestration. The proposal includes a series of cuts as well as tax hikes, primarily on millionaires. Earlier this week, top military leaders appeared before Congress to urge a delay to the automatic cuts. The Pentagon's set to lose $46 billion in funding come March under President Obama's spending deal with Republicans. Martin Dempsey, the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and General Raymond Odierno, the U.S. Army Chief of Staff, said the cuts could bring about a crisis of military readiness.
The magnitude of this thing, even if we got all of the authority in the universe to deal with it, this would be the steepest, biggest reduction in total obligating authority for the Defense Department in history at a time when I will personally attest to the fact that it's more dangerous than it's ever been.
We have and we will continue to do our part. But the significance of these budget reductions will directly impact our ability to sustain readiness today and into the future. We simply cannot take the readiness of our force for granted. If we do not have the resources to train and equip the force, our soldiers, our young men and women are the ones who will pay the price.
A pair of senators have unveiled a comprehensive plan to address climate change in the United States. The legislation by independent Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont and California Democrat Barbara Boxer aims to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 80% by 2050. Amidst other sweeping measures, the bill would impose a fee on greenhouse gas emissions that would help fund investments in renewable energy. It would also provide rebates to consumers to offset potential price hikes by fossil fuel companies. Senators Sanders and Boxer touted the bill at a news conference Wednesday.
A major focus of this legislation is a price on carbon and methane emissions. This fee on the largest fossil fuel polluters affects less than 3,000 entities nationwide, but covers 85% of the U.S. greenhouse gas emissions, according to the Congressional Research Service. This legislation ends the fossil fuel subsidies and protects communities by requiring that fracking operations comply with the Safe Drinking Water Act and disclose the chemicals they use.
The proceeds will create jobs, many jobs, and the rest of the proceeds will reduce the deficit. So the Sanders-Boxer bill reduces carbon pollution and climate disruption while creating jobs and reducing the deficit. If ever there was a win-win-win, this bill is a win-win-win.
The largest climate change rally ever is expected in the Capitol on Sunday. In the U.S. House of Representatives, a team of bipartisan lawmakers has introduced a bill to prohibit the use of armed drones within the United States. The bill would restrict the use of drones by law enforcement, requiring judicial approval and restricting surveillance to criminal acts. U.S. aviation officials are now seeking proposals for 6 sites that would be used to test the use of domestic drones across the country. The former chair of the Republican Party in Florida has pleaded guilty to charges of grand theft and money laundering. Jim Greer was indicted in 2010 on allegations of steering political donations into his own private accounts. He made waves last year after disclosing top Florida Republican officials openly discussed suppressing Florida's African-American vote. Online retailer Amazon is facing a scandal in Germany amidst allegations it employed security guards with neo-Nazi ties in a bid to intimidate foreign workers. A documentary broadcast by Germany's ARD television channel revealed guards in black uniforms, boots, and military haircuts commonly search the living spaces of migrant workers. The firm is called Hess Security, which ARD implied was a reference to Adolf Hitler's deputy, Rudolf Hess. As President Obama continues his push for stricter gun control in the wake of the Newtown shooting massacre, a new report says his administration has been prosecuting far fewer gun crimes than the Bush administration. A research group connected to Syracuse University found federal weapons prosecutions have declined to their lowest levels in nearly a decade. President Obama is expected to speak about gun violence during an address in his home city of Chicago today. A media advocacy group says a record number of journalists were imprisoned around the world last year in what it termed a deteriorating environment for press freedom. The Committee to Protect Journalists says 232 journalists were jailed last year, the highest number since surveying began in 1990. 70 journalists were killed in the line of duty, an increase of more than 40% from the previous year. A top Native American leader is urging House lawmakers to reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act and follow tribal governments to prosecute non-Native men who abuse women and allow who abuse women on tribal lands. Jefferson Keel, president of the National Congress of American Indians, made the remarks Thursday in a State of Indian Nations address. He said the death rate of Native women on some reservations is 10 times the national average. Nearly 60% of Native women are married to non-Native men, and according to Justice Department data, non-Native men carry out 90% of reported rapes against Native women. Keel said tribes still remain powerless.
Today, tribes do not have the authority to prosecute non-natives who beat, rape, or even kill women on tribal lands. State and federal authorities are often hundreds of miles away without the local resources to investigate crimes. And in recent times, U.S. attorneys have declined to prosecute a majority of violent crimes in Indian country, most of which are related to sexual abuse. No other government would stand for this violation of sovereignty or continued injustice. No other government should, and no other government has to. The solution is simple. Congress must reauthorize the landmark Violence Against Women Act and assure that tribal governments have the authority to prosecute non-Native men accused of violence against women on tribal lands.
The Senate has passed a version of the Violence Against Women Act that allows Native American courts to prosecute non-Native domestic violence suspects, as well as providing new protections for LGBT and undocumented women. House Speaker John Boehner signaled Thursday House Republicans may be open to considering the Senate version after initially blocking the bill's reauthorization over the expanded protections. In more than 200 cities around the world Thursday, people flocked to the streets to dance as part of the global 1 Billion Rising campaign to end violence against women and girls. Global actions included marches, rallies, flash mobs, workshops, lots of dancing. One country at the forefront of the global uprisings was India, where mass protests had previously erupted over the gang rape and murder of a young woman on a bus in New Delhi. Hundreds also joined the 1 Billion Rising action in Johannesburg, South Africa, where on that same day, the girlfriend of Paralympic star Oscar Pistorius was shot dead on the outskirts of the capital. Pistorius, known globally as the first double-leg amputee to run in the Olympics, appeared in court today to face a single charge of murder. But on Thursday, protesters like Yvette Raphael were more focused on his alleged victim, the 30-year-old model Riva Steenkamp.
A woman died again. A woman died, and I'm angry. I'm angry that a woman died again today. Whether Oscar is guilty or not, I cannot say, but all I can say, a woman died, and it's one woman too many.
New York City also joined the global uprising with more than 40 events at museums, parks, stores, and in the streets. This is protester Ezra Miller at the action in Times Square.
All revolutionary causes should start with addressing misogyny. It comes down to a day-to-day acknowledgement of gender dynamics in our society and and a slow but steady work to change those dynamics.
And today marks the 10th anniversary of the historic wave of global protests against the war in Iraq. Tens of millions of people took to the streets in hundreds of cities around the world to say no to war. The BBC said the protest in London was the largest in the capital's political history. Protest sites included Australia, Johannesburg, Tel Aviv, Syria, Tokyo, Bangladesh, South Korea, Hong Kong, Thailand, Puerto Rico, Brazil, East Timor, India, and even the South Pole. At least 500,000 rallied in New York City alone 10 years ago. The U.S.-led invasion of Iraq would begin just over a month later. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Juan Gonzalez. Welcome to all of our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world.
Thanks so much for watching this report from Democracy Now!, your daily independent global news hour. We don't accept advertising or corporate funding, but rather rely on donations from viewers like you. Please make your contribution by visiting democracynow.org. We need your support today to keep bringing you this hard-hitting, in-depth reporting.